I tried the gym first. I went 5 sessions a week for months. The weight went up. Same food, more exercise, worse results. I couldn't work out why. Everything I'd read said this was the answer. Move more, eat less, repeat until thin. And then I lost 4.5 stone without going near a gym once. Not for 13 months. And I finally understood what I'd been getting wrong about the order of things. I'm Neil. I've been tracking weight, movement and blood markers for over 2 years, and everything's documented. The steps, the blood test, the 13-month gap before I touched a weight. In the next 15 minutes, I'll show you why the sequence matters more than the effort for most people over 40. And what changes when you do it in the right order. If you've made the decision to change and exercise feels like the obvious first move, this mechanism is worth understanding before you start. First, what the data shows about why exercise doesn't produce the results it should when the metabolic system isn't ready. The specific reason, not the usual explanation. Second, the 13 months I walked before I touched a weight, what happened to my body and what my blood test showed at the end of it. And then what happened to my cholesterol in the 3 months after I finally started lifting. Because that result genuinely surprised me. We start with 5 sessions a week and a scale that went the wrong way. Here's what nobody explained to me when I was at the gym. The gym wasn't the problem, the timing was. Professor Janet Lord, inflammation researcher at the University of Birmingham, spent decades studying what chronic inflammation does to the aging body. She puts it simply, moving muscle produces cytokines, specifically anti-inflammatory cytokines. These are signalling molecules that tell your immune system to calm down, to stop attacking. And the more your muscle is moving, the more of them it produces. Here's the bit that stopped me. The more you sit, the less of those are being produced. So exercise has an anti-inflammatory effect built in. That's real, documented. But here's what I hadn't heard mentioned. Exercise also produces a pro-inflammatory response during and immediately after the session. Micro damage to muscle fibres, oxidative stress from the effort. Your immune system has to deal with that. When everything's working well, the anti-inflammatory signal wins. Your body repairs, adapts, gets stronger. Net effect, reduced inflammation over time. When your inflammatory load is already high, which for most people over 40 who've spent years on the wrong food, with disrupted sleep, with the guts that's struggling, the maths change. The pro-inflammatory signal from the effort lands on a system, well, that's already running hot. Net effect, more inflammation, not less. Think of your body like a business in a recession. Revenue's down, the business is already in cost-cutting mode. It's doing the minimum to survive. You then come in and say, right, we're going to expand, new premises, new staff, new inventory. The business says, I don't have the cash for that. Expansion costs money that it doesn't have. You've asked a body in metabolic recession to take on the additional load of repair and adaptation. It can't, not properly. The current sequence, first, get the business out of recession, sort the inputs, reduce the food-driven inflammation, let the gut recover, let insulin sensitivity start to come back. Then you can expand. Then exercise becomes a multiplier on a system that's actually ready to be multiplied. Janet Lord's step count research makes this concrete. She tracked 200 older adults with Fitbits, not self-reported, actual measured steps. The group doing 3,000 steps or fewer had high inflammaging, her term for the chronic lower level inflammation. That's 2 to 3 times higher in older adults and drives heart disease, metabolic dysfunction and muscle loss. The group doing 5,000 to 7,000 steps had dropped that by about 50% and 10,000 steps, essentially no measurable inflammaging. Those aren't gym sessions, that's walking at what I'd call the realistic floor. The level a working adult in the 40s and 50s can actually sustain. This mechanism matters whether you've been diagnosed with anything or not. Inflammaging builds over years quietly before it shows up on any blood test. Understanding the sequence now gives you more options than understanding it later. Think of it like your body's thermostat. Chronic inflammation is the heating stuck on in summer. Exercise is the thermostat. But if the heating's stuck on because of the food, the gut, the sleep, because the boiler itself is broken, turning the thermostat dial doesn't fix the boiler. You fix the boiler first, then the thermostat works properly. The second piece, and this is where it clicked for me, comes from Dr. Javier Gonzalez at the University of Bath. He studies how exercise and blood sugar interact. And what he found is that exercise has a two-pronged effect on insulin sensitivity. First, during and after the session, muscles take up glucose directly, independent of insulin. The muscle just pulls it in. Second, the 24 to 48 hours after exercise, insulin sensitivity stays elevated. The muscle's more receptive. Insulin works better. That second effect is the multiplier. One good session and your insulin sensitivity is improved for the next day and a half. But, and here's the mechanism that explained my gym failure, that affects scales with what you're starting from. If your insulin sensitivity is already poor, if your CRP is high, if your HbA1c has been climbing for years and you haven't changed the inputs yet, you're starting the multiplier at the wrong point. Think about learning to drive. You can't learn to drive efficiently if the car is stuck in third gear with a seized gearbox. You change gear smoothly when the gearbox works. Exercise multiplies insulin sensitivity, but if insulin sensitivity is near zero because the metabolic system is broken, you're multiplying zero. The maths doesn't help you. Fix the gearbox first, then you can drive. The common misconception here is that exercise is the engine. It's not. It's the multiplier. The engine is what and when you eat, combined with the gut that processes it and the sleep that regulates the hormones around it. Get the engine working. Add exercise, you compound. Add exercise without fixing the engine, you add load to a system that's already failing. So 5 gym sessions a week, 2022. I didn't know any of this. I was doing what I'd read. More exercise, cut calories, the scales went the wrong way. In hindsight, that makes complete sense. My CRP in December 2023 was at a level consistent with significant systemic inflammation. My HbA1c was 47, 1 point from a diabetes diagnosis. My liver enzymes were elevated. The metabolic system was running hot. Adding 5 gym sessions a week was asking a business in deep recession to expand. Boxing Day 2023, I stopped doing what I'd been doing. Changed the food, started fasting, no gym, just walking. For 13 months, the only structured movement I did was walk. I tracked it. I averaged 4,295 steps a day. That's the number below the 5,000 floor that Janet Lord talks about, below what most health guidance would consider adequate. I was not hitting 10,000 steps on most days. I was hitting roughly 4,000 in those 13 months. 4.5 stone lost, 60 pounds, no gym. Now, I want to be clear about what did the work here. The food and the fasting did the work. The walking kept the inflammatory signal from going completely flat. But the weight came off because the engine changed, not because I was burning calories in the gym. And what happened in the blood test during that period is what the data show should happen when you fix the system in the right order. HbA1c moved from 47 to 40 by January 2025, from pre-diabetic to normal. ALT came down from 69 to levels inside reference range. The inflammatory markers, when I tested CRP in January 2025, were dropping. The metabolic recession was ending. There's something worth saying about the 4,295 steps, because I know that number will surprise people. Janet Lord's research shows the biggest gains come from going from nothing to 3,000 and from 3,000 to 5,000 to 7,000. You don't have to be at 10,000 to get benefit. The thermostat starts working again well before that. Walking, even at a modest level, produces those anti-inflammatory cytokines from moving muscle. It's not nothing, it just isn't the gym. And it isn't what most exercise content tells you to prioritise. And that pattern, the mechanism in my data, isn't specific to my situation. The same process, inflammation high, metabolic system struggling, inputs changed, inflammation reducing over months, that runs in a lot of people before anything gets flagged on a blood test. January 2025, HbA1c 37, optimal range, CRP dropping significantly. That's when I started lifting. 3 things, 3 times a week, weighted squats, weighted lunges, and some dumbbell work. Progressive overload. When I cleared 15 reps on the first set, I added weight the following session. No fancy program, the minimum effective dose. The cholesterol result in April 2025 genuinely surprised me. HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, had been declining for 11 years on statins. 11 years. In the April test, 14 months off all medication and 3 months into resistance training, HDL had risen from 1.3 to 1.5, 15% increase. First upward movement in over a decade. The cholesterol to HDL ratio moved from 6.15 to 4.7, now within target for the first time since 2016. The GP asked if I'd gone back on statins. I hadn't. He knew that. What had changed was the sequence. The metabolic system had been repaired first. Then the exercise multiplied it. And that's what the multiplier looks like when it lands on a ready system. Not 5 sessions a week going sideways. A 15% HDL rise and a ratio back in range in 90 days. 3 months. The struggle I didn't expect. Compared to my friends, the first 6 weeks of walking only felt embarrassingly modest. Everyone else around me seemed to be doing something more dramatic. HIIT classes, running, cycling. But 4,000 steps and a fasting window felt like it couldn't possibly have been enough. But the data said otherwise. 6 medications, statins, gout pills, asthma inhalers, allergy tablets, the lot. I stopped all of them in 2024, not because a YouTuber told me to, but because I'd been working on fasting and eating whole food. If documenting that kind of thing properly sounds worth following, please subscribe. If I were starting this from scratch, knowing what I now know, I'd have done one thing differently in the movement piece. I'd have got a baseline blood test first. Not to diagnose anything, just to know what I was starting from. CRP, HbA1c, fasting glucose, if those numbers show the system is struggling, and for most people over 40 who've been eating the standard Western diet for 20 years, they will, then the sequence should be fix the inputs first. Walk, don't gym. Here's what that looks like practically. Start with 4, 5, 6,000 steps a day, not 10,000. 4 to 6,000 is a realistic floor for a working adult. I know I was at the lower end. It's the level where Janet Lord's data shows you're getting meaningful anti-inflammatory benefits without the intimidation of a target that you're going to struggle to hit every day, just from the time it takes to walk. If you do that consistently for 8 to 12 weeks before introducing resistance training, let the inflammation settle, let insulin sensitivity begin to come back. If you can get a blood test, CRP, HbA1c, fasting glucose, before you start, and again at 12 weeks, you'll have data. You'll be able to see whether the metabolic system is shifting. That's when exercise becomes a multiplier rather than additional load. When you do introduce resistance, the minimum effective dose is lower than you think. 3 movements, 3 times a week. Push, pull, squat, body weight or light dumbbells to start. 2 sets of 8 reps is enough in the early weeks. The goal is not intensity, it's habit. You're teaching the gearbox to shift. Once it's shifting smoothly, you can add load. Timeline expectation. The walking and food changes should produce measurable change in blood markers within 3 to 6 months. The resistance training added on top of an already improving system should compound that over the following 3 months. You're not looking at weeks, you're looking at a 6 to 9 month arc before you have a proper before and after comparison. One safety note, if you're on medication, particularly diabetes medication, blood pressure medication, or anything affecting insulin, speak to your GP before making significant changes to your movement routine. Fasting and exercise together affects how medication works in the body, and that conversation matters. I've built a simple tracking document, steps, fasting window, blood markers that I used across those 13 months. It's the tool I wish I'd had at the start. Links in the description and it's free. This is educational content only. It is not medical advice. Please speak to your GP before changing your fasting pattern, your diet or your medication, especially if you're on diabetes or blood pressure meds.